John McCain went on CNN to talk about the incident at the Armed Services Committee with Code Pink protesters. So let's watch and notice here how shameless he is with his bullshit.
When you were chairing the Armed Services Committee hearing with Henry Kissinger, where protesters called him a war criminal and worse.
Arrest Henry Kissinger for war crimes!
Committee was
And you used some language that was also pretty intense.
I have never seen anything as disgraceful and outrageous and despicable as the last demonstration that just took place about, you're going to have to shut up or I'm going to have you arrested. Get out of here, you low-life scum.
Now that we're past that, past the heat of the moment, did you think that was the way you would handle it again?
Dana, these people were physically threatening Henry Kissinger. I'm used to people popping up at these hearings and yelling, and then they're escorted out. That's at least some version of free speech. These people rushed up. They were right next to Henry Kissinger, waving handcuffs up. He's a 91-year-old man with a broken shoulder who was willing to come down and testify before Congress to give us the benefit of his many years of wisdom. Of course I was outraged, and I am still outraged. It's one thing to stand up and protest. It's something else to physically threaten an individual, particularly an individual who has served so much to his country, whether you agree or not. As I happen to believe he's one of the great statesmen of my lifetime, or maybe of the whole 20th century.
You called them scum. That name calling, you think?
I think they're terrible people, okay? I think there are terrible people that would do that to a 91-year-old man with a broken shoulder to physically threaten him. That is beyond any norm of behavior that I have ever observed.
So from your perspective, it wasn't what they said or the fact that they were protesting, it's the way they handled it and who they were talking to.
The way they literally surrounded him and were physically so in such proximity to him that he was in danger of being harmed.
John, we have a video of it. We can see whether or not what you're saying is true. It's right there, and he obviously was not physically threatened. He was physically threatened, really. He was physically threatened. What were they going to do? Were they going to punch him in the face? Were they going to wrestle him? What were they going to do? What were they going to do? The person who was closest to him was like 5 to 10 feet away, holding up handcuffs and showing it to him. And there were people blocking it too. You're saying, you just argued that peace protesters, that's what they do. The Code Pink goes around and calls for peace. Peace protesters, anti-war activists, were physically threatening a 91-year-old man. You should be embarrassed. You should be embarrassed. Because you're just rationalizing the fact that you're an asshole and you called them scumbags. That's what you're doing. And I love how now, all of a sudden, he's like, no, I totally support free speech, except when I was telling people to shut up or get out. I'm in favor of free speech after the fact now, but at the time, of course, I wasn't, and I wanted to kick them out immediately. Now, understand something, man. If you have a problem with these kinds of protests, okay, fine, whatever. There's plenty of people who have that opinion, and you're entitled to that opinion. But to say that, therefore, they were threatening Henry Kissinger, you can't say that, because that's just totally made up. And the irony of this all is he calls them bad people. He's like, look, these are just terrible people. But, John, the whole reason why they're there is because they're saying, hey, research Henry Kissinger a little bit. It turns out he's a bad person. He's a terrible person. And we're saying that not because Henry Kissinger protested somebody and held handcuffs up 5 to 10 feet away from them. No, what Henry Kissinger did was he was directly involved with covert operations in Laos and Chile when they overthrew the democratic government of Chile and supported a coup and put in a dictator who killed thousands of people and tortured 30,000 people. We actively supported them. The East Timor situation. And by the way, they went down a list, all the protesters went down a list arrest Henry Kissinger for war crimes, and then they would say, for the people of Laos, for the people of East Timor, for the people of Chile, and they would go through all the different things that he did. So they're giving specifics. You weren't curious to look at it and to see what he did, to see whether or not they had a point? So take East Timor, for example. In East Timor, Indonesia did a genocide in East Timor. Now, the leader of Indonesia, Suharto, he got weapons and financial backing from the U.S., and he got the green light from the U.S. to go into East Timor and do what he did. Henry Kissinger was directly involved with that. So that's why they're calling to arrest him for war crimes, because they supported brutal regimes and dictatorships, and they helped fund coups and overthrow people. Why? Because they thought that with these dictators, with these authoritarian regimes in place, that U.S. corporations could take more natural resources from all these different areas and have more strength geopolitically. And they did it because they were afraid of communism still. It was the Red Scare. They thought, oh, well, let's just prop up authoritarian right-wingers in all these different places, in South America and in different places in Asia, because we feel more comfortable if we have the regimes we want there instead of any kind of left-wing regime. So those are war crimes by any straightforward understanding and definition of war crimes according to the Geneva Conventions and international courts. I mean, it's clear. So, John, he's a bad guy. He's the terrible person. But you're glossing over all his record to attack the people who are calling him out for his record in a peaceful demonstration. John, you're an embarrassment.